Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Every Day is Earth Day webinar series hosted by Emerald Built Environments. Today, we will be talking about mitigating business risk with WELL. My name is Sophia Hestead, and I'm a project engineer here at Emerald. I primarily lead O&M and energy modeling projects, but today I'm your webinar leader. A few housekeeping items to start. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A feature during the presentation, and we will get to them at the end. We are recording this webinar and will make it available to registered participants. Today, our host is founder and managing member of Emerald, Laura Steinbrink. Laura has an unparalleled understanding and passion for sustainability and how we can all make a difference in the design, construction, and operations of all building types, including how to leverage sustainability to improve ESG performance. You are in luck, as today we are also joined by Kevin Gregory of Health Action Council, a nonprofit organization of employers and union groups who offer health benefits and wellness services. Kevin manages the product portfolio and organizational growth. Laura, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. We are glad that you are here today. Just a quick little overview of both Emerald and Health Action Council before we get started. We are a sustainability consulting firm focused on that intersection of buildings and business. We are located in Cleveland, Ohio, but work across the United States and internationally. Many people in our industry have 2030 goals in recognition of the importance to collectively work towards climate action. And by that date, and we are proud to announce that we are at now 1,458 sustainable environments touched towards our 2030 goal of 2030. All of the things that we do at Emerald follow what we call the Emerald Way. It's our four-step process of listening and strategizing, evaluating and planning, implementing and testing and measuring. And one of the reasons we do the webinar series is because we know that this listen and strategize, there's also a lot of questions that people ask. So we like to bring relevant topics to the table for people to enjoy. Kevin, give us an overview of Health Action Council before we dive into the content today.
Thanks, Laura. Health Action Council is a nonprofit organization founded here in Northeast Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, started with 5 members, focusing on the quality of care that's being delivered to their employees. We have since grown since it's our 40th year since 1983 to 235 different employers all over the country, ranging from Hawaii to Maine and Oregon down to the beautiful state of Florida. And we work typically with HR departments and their benefits folks to improve the quality, safety, efficiency, and the affordability of healthcare that they get.
I just love that we're doing this webinar today because you and I have had conversations for years. At this point in time, we can say years about WELL and why it would matter to businesses. And, you come at it from the, space that you're in, and we come at it from ours, and like trying to find this, this way really to just get people to understand what the opportunities are by looking at a rating system, right? Like WELL. So just a quick overview, it's a building certification. There are different types of WELL certifications. There's WELL performance, there's WELL health safety, there's what they just call the WELL certification system. They're all focused on what we call people first places. So having categories and criteria that really focus on healthy air, clean water, healthy foods, access to natural light, encouragement of movement throughout this space, either standing desks and stairs that are activated, making sure people are comfortable, the thermal comfort, sound, the materials that go into the building so it's healthy, ways to activate the mind and to provide opportunities for people to really calm the mind when necessary at work, and then the connection then again with community. So it's a really robust certification. It's focused on the building, but it's really about the space and wellness. And it interacts with health, right, Kevin? Right?
It does, Laura. And I think that throughout our conversations, and what excites me about WELL is, on the left-hand side here, we look at social determinants of health, which at Health Action Council, we believe in taking action on things. We've been studying, social determinants of health since 2014, the impact that they have on health plans. And a lot of what we focus in on in human resources and other areas in the benefits departments is that quadrant up there that says, healthcare access and quality. And so we're always looking at our vendors. Do we have the right vendors? Do we have the right care? When ultimately there's so much more that goes into your health that has an impact. I call that life, things that have an impact on, which kind of covers at the same time. So the idea to me, as I talk about when we're looking at human capital risk management, which is a philosophy that we've started talking about at Health Action Council, building off of social determinants of health, is how do you look at the big picture, step back from what you're doing, which does. Forces the company to look at all of the things to look at their business, how they're doing it, look at their people, and make better choices. And those are the things, when you look around everything else besides healthcare access and quality, that lines up with social determinants, or they're changing that name more to social drivers of health. I mean, what's causing your health and health issues. So that's what I like about that is the opportunity for people to step back, look at their business, and then think about how can improve the overall health of their company.
Right. And so let's talk about risk management a little bit, because I mean, we know as sustainability consultants that the work we're doing is mitigating risk, certainly internally and externally. For that company, it's a better building when it's built sustainably and with sustainable principles, whether or not it's focused on the climate or focused on people, it's about mitigating risk. But let's talk about risk from your perspective.
Yeah, so from a human capital risk management standpoint, most folks, again, we're looking at costs are driving us crazy. Our health insurance, is going through the roof. What are we going to do about that? There's unique little things that just kind of levers that move, but it's not really a strategic look at what's going on. And so from a human capital risk management standpoint at Health Action Council, what we like to say is you've got to identify and respond to things that you can impact. There's just certain elements that you cannot impact. And then you figure out what's upstream from those activities, and then figure out how you can take proactive actions about that to mitigate that risk. You talk a lot about simplistically looking at the ceiling. Do you have sprinklers in your building? And you're trying to prevent human loss in the event that there's a fire. You also want to protect your building. But taking a look at it from that perspective, it's what does and what we've been promoting at Health Action Council, because when you look at social drivers or social determinants of health, it has a big impact on your health plan. It has an impact on what you're spending and how you do it. How can you have a positive impact on that? Which excites me about this, starts connecting your building to your people.
Yeah, absolutely. And why is this important? I mean, we would say, it was funny when we were putting this webinar together and we sort of mushed our slides, that you had one that said almost the same thing that ours did, but it came from a different angle with more detail. We always say you spend 90% of your time indoors. This is why spaces matter. But give us the rest of the answer to that question.
Right. So a lot of when you're thinking about human capital management and risk management and what you're trying to do here, yes, there's 168 hours in a week and 90% of it we're spending indoors. And then you break it down into where are you, right? Which is from an employer's perspective and a benefit plan sponsor, if I'm running a health plan, how much control or how much ability do I have to influence people when 40% of their time, or roughly about half of it, is spent doing something else, 29%, hopefully a little bit more than that after sleeping more than 7 hours a night, like the doctors say. And then 24% of the time, which is 40-hour work week, that they're working for you. Life blends together. So it's really, to me, about 53% of your time is life, which is work and sleep, or excuse me, 61. So it's 47 and 21. I got that backwards. So 47 and 21 is just life. Sometimes you're working, sometimes you're vacating, sometimes you're doing those things. But what you can do, we talk about is start modeling behaviors, getting excited about the things that you can for that. The other thing that is certain, especially here in recent years, Laura, as we went from COVID, where a lot of people started working from home. People are trying to figure out what to do. When you think about a long-term sustainability strategy from a human capital perspective, which is who's going to be my next manager and how do I get them trained? How does my information share from one person to the next? I call that osmosis around the water cooler, where I'm picking up knowledge about the other parts of the business so that as I'm growing and I'm wanting to be a manager, I eventually want to become an executive in my company. I'm not getting that if I'm always working at home. So a lot of folks are really looking at, how do I bring my people back? How do I get them into the office again? Because I want to build a long-term, very sustainable business and make that connectivity. And and that well certification process of saying, you've got the sticker on the building, it's about the people, you're modeling wonderful behaviors that leads to better outcomes. That's what I love about, and my world and how it comes together.
Right. Awesome. So let's talk about that, connecting human resources to the boards of directors and like this strategic piece of thinking about well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we get lost, and we wake up every day and we come in and we do our job and not really think about what we're ultimately doing. So here's an example of some strategic goals of an organization. They got workforce planning. How am I balancing the right hires with layoffs? We're seeing a lot of layoffs today, but there's also a lot of hiring. So there's an interesting kind of phenomenon going on in the world today. What's my workforce location? Do I have them on site? Are they hybrid? What does that look like? And what happens to the things that I've done? So a lot of employers who have buildings may have put in on-site clinics, or they have different types of restaurants and foods for people. But if you have a third or even more, I've worked with one plan sponsor, 90% of their building is empty. And so it's a different world. So when you start thinking about where my workforce is and the things that I'm doing for them, and dealing with that, and then building a strong corporate culture, what makes your people want to, I call it NPS for your company, right? That's what culture is to me, your net promoter score for your company. When you're at the cocktail party or you're with your friends on the weekend and they're not working for you, are they saying, working for Emerald or working for Health Action Council is really the best place in the world? That's when you get that net promoter score, and that's what corporate culture does. And then you're aligning your budget spending and your organizational priorities. Again, you start getting into your board goals that come out of that. And so a lot of times when you're thinking about ESG, environmental, social, and governance, you're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. What WELL does and how that kind of ties into what I'm doing and how I see things at Health Action Council for the insurance and health, human resources side of things, it immediately says, I'm taking care of my people, I'm modeling wonderful behaviors, I'm addressing the needs of my most needy population, the people who have the greatest challenges when you're thinking about social drivers of health. I'm helping them. That's addressing diversity, equity, inclusion. You're dealing with environmental, social, and governance issues. So right from a very simple thing of I'm helping one person do something big from what we're doing, leads right up to your board of directors. It's almost like a direct pipeline from the person who comes into work, they open that door, and what you're doing when you put WELL and human capital risk management together is, a pipeline right into your board.
Right. It really is. And that's the whole part of what we wanted to make sure we're talking about today, which is how WELL helps address business risk. And you've already started talking about it, the health of the employee. Why is that a risk, right? So much money is spent on health care, but yet, as you said, 24% of the time is at work. So the preponderance of the life of the employee is happening outside of work, but what are we doing at work, right, to help reduce those costs? And how can we make the workplace healthy so that at least there's some fundamental opportunities, right, for people to be at their best, and then again to like train and create that culture, and then the employee productivity and getting people back to the office. I mean, it's really a yin and a yang right now. To work from home, come into the office, what are you missing, what are you not? And nobody wants to come into a dingy, ugly, yucky, dirty place that doesn't have amenities to support their wellness. right? And then again, right, that corporate governance. So there is such a focus on DE&I and ESG and well maps directly to all of those. So it's really important. So a little bit, this is a really, oops, what did I just do? Is a list of the Emerald bullet points, right, around health and wellness. But I would love you, like, we're not going to read this to our audience today. Give us like your perspective on some of these important elements that are rewarded in the well building system, right? So these are criteria that points are generated, things like that. But tell us from a business perspective why these matter.
Yeah, from a business perspective and a human, there's a couple of ways that you look at well and kind of how it connects. So first of all, you got to get employees in the door. So recruiting them, show your employees that they value and where you're at. That's kind of like, item number one. You want to show people, it's like a good, think of it as a good housekeeping, but it's the well housekeeping seal of approval. That kind of drives that. The rest of these things, when you think about health, so much effort and energy today is talk about mental health and some of the challenges that we're dealing coming out of COVID, and some of it's social isolation. And when we start building that community back and getting people back into the office, you can start, alleviating some of that by having connectivity outside of, those that are just inside the four walls of your home, or where you may be going and dealing with that. So mental health in the long term, which is becoming a bigger expense, it's certainly a major expense driver. And we just studied this here at Health Action Council and a recent white paper that we issued with United Healthcare, talking very specifically about mental health in that younger generation. Sleep. Well, sleep deprivation has a big impact on your body and your health. And so if you're improving, daylight quality, the things that you do at work, translate into your life at night, high quality sleep, I'm going to eliminate my workers' comp costs. I'm going to create, lower healthcare costs for my benefit plans. And we're going to drive that. Access to food and clean water. We have a wide array of people when you're looking at those elements. So when you're thinking about things, big picture, how can you drive down your health plan costs, motivate your people to come to work, and mitigate chronic health spending? So when you think about, the environment that you're working, if you're in a manufacturing environment or your building is full of, poor air quality, you're going to create chronic health issues for your people, and you're going to pay for that in your healthcare plan.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason why, you put that all together. It does matter in how you look at this.
Right. So then that takes us into productivity, which is also a big driver, right? It's harder sometimes to draw these white direct lines between, but there is evidence and research that shows in a healthy space designed with these elements, you're going to have improved productivity, which obviously also impacts the bottom line. And just as a mental note, we are needing to get us to the end so that we can get to our questions. So
that's fine.
Here.
Look, I could go on about this, but the productivity side of this to me about, well, you've got to get people back into the office. And, if you were to ask, a CFO or a CHRO about improving the productivity by creating, essentially a better work environment for them in a call center where that matters, and you can improve it by 5%, most of them are looking for 1 to 2% improvements, and they think that's big. Mm-hmm. Well, forces you or brings that extra value into what we're doing there. So it clearly matters. And that's what excites me about well and kind of how it ties in together with what I'm doing.
Right. Absolutely. And then just sort of to wrap it up, it's that whole idea of what's the board talking about. And we see this all of the time in our projects, major renovations and new construction, where the board is talking about something, but it hasn't made it down to the project team. You can get all kinds of buildings, including existing buildings, well certified. But I think the point here is that connection then to HR, because a lot of times when people try to understand what's happening at the board level, they don't understand all of the team members that need to be at the table. And so when HR starts to get clarity around how space is so important to the business drivers that they're trying to shape and influence, we create that more direct connection. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, it's overlooked, and sometimes the further you get away from the board, sometimes it gets lost on what you're actually doing. And well fills that gap between operational, your people, and all the way up to your board of directors. And it just makes sense. It's a very elegant way of bringing it all together.
Awesome. So then we can just wrap up on who's doing well. We see it locally, nationally, internationally. It's new, it's growing. I can say it's hard work, but no one who's looked at it from our perspective has said no. And they really do see it as an opportunity to engage the full company and making changes that make a difference. Right?
Yep.
Anything? Yeah. Good. So let's get us to questions now. Sophia, do we have any questions from our participants today?
Yes, we've got a couple. So the first one is, how would you advise people who typically deal with buildings, such as facilities managers, architects, or construction teams, to discuss the value of well with human resources?
I'll handle that since I'm kind of, it seems like the HR side of that. And when Laura and I've talked over the years, and I've kind of come to appreciate the whole idea that lead is about your building and well is about your people, and you put them together. And so when you start thinking about your people and your productivity, one of your largest expenses as a business is going to be your people. You're creating a wonderful building as an architect, as a building manager. When you start thinking about who your end customer is the people that are in that building, and those are your employees. And that's where HR comes in. And when you work together and you think about the smallest of details that kind of go into well and kind of creating it, it's the attention to detail that matters. And in the end, it'll create better, essentially it'll help mitigate the healthcare spending that you have. It'll mitigate your workers' comp risks, and it'll increase your productivity. Those are three things that everybody in HR is looking for in the long term.
Great. Next question is, my building is not being renovated. Can we still get well certification?
So Kevin, if you don't mind, hop on that one first and say the answer is yes. Certainly you can do an assessment to find out where you are on the rating system. There's well performance, which is really looking about how your existing building is performance, and how what you have in your space maps to the metrics that they track, like air quality, water quality, things like that. One thing I will say, even if it isn't an existing building in the new construction, I think maybe we didn't get into this, is that there is so much of this rating system that doesn't apply to the space. So yes, there are a lot of elements, and we've just talked about them, criteria that map to thermal comfort and daylight and views, which certainly, if you don't have windows, you don't have daylight, you don't have views. So there's some fundamental things that are about the space. But when we're talking about what food are you offering in your cafeteria, what kind of stakeholder engagement are you doing in the community, what kind of philanthropy do you have, how are you recognizing mothers and their ability to take care of nursing during the workday, and how are you taking care of meditation rooms for people who need that time out? Things like that can happen in existing buildings that aren't about this space and are sometimes sort of outside of the design. And so this work around well really needs to start at the company level and then go to the facilities team, because if the company's not willing to commit to the bigger picture elements around transparency and wellness, it's not going to translate.
Yeah, Laura, I couldn't, the first part of that I could not have addressed because that's your expertise, but it does start at a company level. It starts at an organizational level. And what is your commitment, and what's that atmosphere? What is your culture that you're trying to create as an organization? And well is a wonderful way to help drive and support the culture that most businesses are looking for.
I totally agree. Do we have anything else, Sophia?
Last question. Kevin, can you give examples of how HR departments have spearheaded wellness initiatives?
Sure. So historically, and this is, they look at wellness as, I've got, asthma, diabetes, hypertension problems. I've got back disorders. They look at where they're spending money in their health plan, and then they create activities. A lot of times it's been around getting your numbers checked, what's your blood pressure, what's your A1C levels, or how can I get you moving and more physically active? So a lot of the wellness type activities that people think about, which have been effectively pushed out from an expense standpoint, because the return on investment long term, depending upon the level of turnover that an employer has, doesn't always produce value in a classic wellness type program. But they've always looked at it as how do I get my people healthy, or have them stay healthy to mitigate future risk in the long term. And depending upon the ability, as every CFO that I've ever talked to, is how do you measure the heart attack I didn't have, right? And it's the classic question that comes when you're dealing with anything about wellness and creating better outcomes. So that's historically how they do it. If you tie that to, the work that, I talk about what I like about well and how that ties into bigger pictures with other things, you have to hit people holistically and not look at it just tactically as one thing. As if I get you moving, it's going to, kind of take those steps. So that's historically how they've done it. What I like about well, and Laura talked about it in a little more detail, is it's not just all about your building. It's about process. It's about the organization. How do you help people lead and have a much more, I'll call it, enriched life as an employee of yours.
Right. And I can hop on that a little bit, like that whole, those examples you gave around checking your A1C and your blood pressure and to know your numbers is great. But there's no responsibility to the company in the influence of that. It's just checking your numbers, and it's best practice, right? We're not going to discount the importance of those kind of programs, but let's take it to the next level. Well, what affects A1C? It's the food and the snacks that are in the snack room. That is a criteria optional thing for well. What affects the blood pressure? Maybe a meditation room can help people bring that down. If they've got a place to go, turn the lights off for, even 1 or 2 minutes has been demonstrated to help people bring that blood pressure down so that they're not, under a stressful environment. So there are ways that people can, certainly the HR professionals that are trying to get new initiatives and things into their companies can look at this rating system to see what other ideas, or how could I reposition that one thing I want to have done now that I know this directly maps to UN sustainability goals or ESG initiatives or others. Like, how can I change that conversation by leveraging the topics that are in this rating system? It's a tool, right? You don't have to get the certification. It's great if you do, but it's a tool that everybody should have in their toolbox and some understanding of it. There was a question I'm hopping on, Sophia. I don't know if you saw that one about the CEU for the webinar. The question is, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe no, but I do, depending on where you want that CEU, I do know, especially if you're in the sustainability professional world, there are ways that we can help you document that. So feel free to reach out to us after and let's see if we can help you get that. Anything else, Sophia, from our audience?
There is not. So we are out of time. Please feel free to reach out directly to our speakers with any additional questions at the contact information on the screen. Thank you for joining for today's webinar. This wraps up our series. Stay tuned for more webinars and educational opportunities in 2023. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.